My name is Kiona, and I am a 30-year-old housewife. 2 years ago, I married my husband, Aoki, who is 6 years older than me. We live in his parents' house with them, Robert and Barbara, who are both in their 60s. Thankfully, they are healthy and full of energy. While being energetic is generally good, Barbara loves to go out and have fun. I'm not sure if it started when I moved in or if it's always been this way, but she hardly does any housework. Barbara was supposed to be a stay-at-home mom, but she often says things like, "Dinner isn't ready yet? You had plenty of time." She pushes the chores onto me and goes out to enjoy herself. If I don't finish everything before she comes back, she makes snarky comments. I try to stay calm, but it's hard. I often remind her that I might not finish everything while she's gone. Her response is always something like, "What are you complaining about? This is normal." She also complains about my generation and wishes I would learn from Aoki. If it were just the snide remarks, I could handle it, but Barbara constantly brags about Aoki, especially since he works for a big company. She often says things like, "Aoki works so hard, but his wife is a failure." My husband doesn't stand up for me during these conversations. When Barbara complains about me, he only responds with a disinterested, "Oh, really?" At first, I thought Aoki was mature because he was older, but now I feel like he sees me as just a maid. Even when I'm working late at night, he doesn't say anything. Instead, he throws laundry at me, aiming for my face, and says, "Hey, this too." I regret marrying someone like him. He has changed a lot since we got married. For our first anniversary, he bought a cake but then threw a pie in my face while laughing. It's hard to believe he's 36 years old. There is one bright spot in my life, my father-in-law, Robert. He is very calm and always thanks me for my help, asking if I need anything. He is the only one who treats me kindly in this house. Since I quit my job after getting married, I enjoy chatting with Robert, and I've come to care for him like a real father. However, he works during the day, so he's rarely home, which means I spend a lot of time alone with Barbara. When I talk to Robert, Barbara doesn't say much, but I can tell she doesn't like it. She started saying things like, "Don't make eyes at your father-in-law just because Aoki ignores you." It's disgusting. Of course, she says this where Robert can't hear. I tried to defend myself, saying, "That's not true at all." But Barbara just retorted, "Oh my, did I hit a nerve? You're raising your voice, how unbecoming." No matter what I say, she always has a comeback. Our conversations never connect. I talked to Aoki about this, hoping he would understand that Barbara is just imagining things. Instead, he laughed and said, "So, you're even into men over 60? You're really open-minded." I realized it was hopeless to expect him to help with the housework or stop Barbara's bullying, but I never thought he would say something like that. It was a huge shock. I started feeling like I didn't belong in the house. One summer day, Barbara said, "I'm thinking of going on a family trip when Aoki gets his summer vacation." I thought, here she goes again, always wanting to go out. But then she surprised me by saying, "You're coming too, right, Kiona?" I didn't expect to be invited. I thought they would go without me. When I asked if I wanted to go, I didn't say no, but I felt suspicious. I wondered why Barbara wanted me to join. I was worried about what she might say if I refused. That night, Aoki asked me again, "You're going on the trip, right?" I replied, "Yeah, I was invited." When I said that, Aoki burst out laughing for some reason. I asked, "What's so funny?" He just said, "Nothing really." This made me feel uneasy, and my anxiety grew. On the day of the trip, we set out, with Aoki driving. Robert would join us later because of work, so it was just me, Aoki, and Barbara in the car. Aoki was driving, Barbara was in the passenger seat, and I was in the back seat. I could only see glimpses of their faces, which made me even more anxious. "Kiona, you withdrew some money for the trip, right?" Barbara asked. I said, "Yes, a few $100s. Barbara seemed to smirk when she heard this. As we drove, I noticed we had passed the inn where we were supposed to stay. "Didn't we just pass the inn?" I asked. "There's a tourist spot nearby. We'll check in after we see it," Aoki answered, half smiling. It was clear he was hiding something strange. As we drove further from the inn, the area became greener. I sighed quietly, hoping they didn't hear me. Finally, we arrived at a dam. To be honest, it wasn't a big dam, and there weren't many people around. It was far from a tourist spot. "Come on, let's get out of the car," Barbara urged. "Don't leave any belongings in the car. It could be dangerous," my husband warned. I followed their advice. Just as I was about to get out of the car, Barbara and Aoki started acting like they were busy. Barbara said, "Oh, I should take off my jewelry just in case," and Aoki pretended to look for something in his pocket. They weren't getting out of the car. I stepped out and closed the door. Then I heard the sound of the lock clicking. Aoki cracked the driver's and passenger's windows slightly open while laughing. "What are you doing getting out here? Are you planning to stay here tonight?" he asked, laughing uproariously. I was furious with Barbara but tried to stay calm. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You got out on your own, didn't you?" My husband laughed so hard he was holding his stomach. I realized my wallet and cell phone were still in the car. Everything was going according to Barbara and Aoki's plan. "Well, Kiona, enjoy yourself," Barbara said with a smirk. "Eat some grass and sleep outside." Aoki held my wallet, flipping through it, and then closed the window. Their laughter faded as they drove away. "Well, they're a handful, and it's hot," I muttered. It was the height of summer, and I was at risk of dehydration, but I didn't panic at all. An hour later, I arrived at the lobby of the inn where we were supposed to stay. "Why are you here?" my husband asked, shocked. "Are you a ghost? Did something happen at the dam?" Barbara looked like she was about to faint. I considered pretending to be a ghost but decided against it. "I'm not a ghost, and I'm staying here tonight," I said, showing them the key to my room. I had already left my luggage in the room. My husband couldn't understand the situation and was losing his cool. He thought I had taken the key to their room without permission. "What are you doing? Give it back," he yelled, trying to snatch the key from me roughly. At that moment, a man appeared and grabbed my husband's hand. "Sir, please refrain from causing a disturbance here," the man said. He looked to be about the same age as Robert but had a sturdy build and was taller, making him seem more reliable than my slightly overweight husband. "Who are you? Are you staff here? Do you think it's okay to treat a guest like this?" Aoki shouted. "I will sue you for assault." Barbara joined in, yelling at the man who had intervened. "I apologize for not introducing myself earlier. I am the owner of this inn," the man said politely. When my husband heard that, he quickly withdrew his hand. I remembered the owner from my college days. I had come to this area on a trip with friends during summer vacation. I remembered that it was really hot that day. We didn't have much money, so we were walking to our accommodation, complaining about the heat. None of us, including me, were good at reading maps, so we got lost and ended up in a place with very few people. There, we found a girl collapsed on the side of the road. That girl was Mary, the owner's daughter. We quickly called an ambulance and took care of her until it arrived. The next day, the owner came to the small inn where we were staying. He thanked us profusely, saying, "You saved my daughter's life. Thank you so much." He also invited us to come back anytime, saying we wouldn't have to pay. Since then, my family and I have visited the inn several times. That's why I knew the owner. The owner who was reprimanding my husband and Barbara was polite, but I could tell he was very angry. In fact, both he and I were aware of Barbara and my husband's low-level plan from the beginning. I noticed something was off when they invited me on the trip, so I set up a voice recorder in the living room. I recorded their conversations while I was taking a bath or doing laundry, and their plan was revealed. "How about we leave Kiona somewhere? That would be hilarious." "Oh, how about here? There's a gym about an hour's drive from the inn," I heard them say. I was shocked. I immediately called the inn and spoke to the owner, telling him everything that was happening and what they planned for the future. The owner was furious. He remembered how his daughter had collapsed in the heat, so he was even more upset. The owner arranged for my pickup after my husband and Barbara drove away. He had me ride in the inn shuttle. By the way, the driver was Mary from that time. "I got my license. Let's go for a drive," she said excitedly. "We're driving right now," I replied. We chatted happily and even bought some local specialty ice cream on the way. We arrived at the inn several minutes earlier than my husband and Barbara. "You mentioned suing earlier," the owner said, looking at Barbara sternly. "Yes, I did. It's outrageous to be accused of this," Barbara replied. "I'm sorry, but you're not our guests," the owner said firmly. "What? Don't mess with us," my husband and Barbara shouted angrily. "Your and your mother's reservations have been cancelled." I added. Who do you think you are? My husband asked. About to lose his temper again, the owner restrained him and said, Kiona did nothing wrong. We, the inn, cancelled your reservations. If you left a woman alone at the dam in the mountains after stealing her wallet, wouldn't you be the perpetrators of a crime? We can't allow such people to stay here. We also called the police. At this, my husband and Barbara became even more furious. What are you talking about? This is no joke. Don't you think you can get away with this? I work at our company, my husband shouted. Just then, Robert arrived. Hey, what's going on here? He sensed the tense atmosphere and looked around. What's happening? These inn people are weird. Let's stay somewhere else. They're incredibly rude, Barbara and my husband complained. Instead of listening to them, Robert asked me and the owner about the situation. When he heard what had happened, he became furious. You idiots. This was the first time I had seen Robert yell. How embarrassing. I can't believe we're from the same family. You two need to get out of here. Now. Where to? My husband asked with a wry smile, but Robert was firm. You're disowned. Get out. No, don't make me say it again. Robert pushed my husband away. Then, the police really did show up, and my husband and Barbara turned pale. The owner and I explained the situation to the officer. I even played back the recorded conversation for them. My husband and Barbara started crying, but Robert quickly said, Quiet down, you're disturbing the inn. The officer asked, What's going on? It's not like that. We didn't think it would be such a big deal. It was just a prank, my husband and Barbara pleaded. But the officer's expression changed. A prank? Are you serious? Don't you think your little pride could cost someone their life, especially your own wife? Barbara and my husband were scolded harshly, but they weren't arrested because it was a family dispute. They both looked very pale. Before they left, the officer warned them, This isn't over. Kiona's feelings will determine your future. After that, Robert seemed apologetic the whole time. He kept saying, I'm really, really sorry. I can't apologize enough for not noticing the unpleasant experiences you've been having and for the terrible ordeal today. He also apologized deeply to the owner of the inn, saying, I'm sorry for causing this trouble, especially since you've always been so kind to us. What Robert didn't know was that the owner ran several other companies and was a client of Robert's workplace. Ironically, my husband had boasted about working for a big company without realizing that he was causing trouble with someone important. I felt a mix of satisfaction and fear. I was glad I could punish my husband and Barbara, but it was scary to think about what could have happened if I hadn't known their plan. I hoped that being scolded by the police would help them realize how serious the situation was. After returning from the inn, I divorced my husband and demanded a large amount of alimony. I wanted them to reflect on their actions and not treat anyone else this way in the future. I also heard that Robert and Barbara got divorced. Robert cut ties with my ex-husband and kicked him out of the house. My ex-husband was advised to resign because of the incident, and it turned out he had already been a problem at work. He had bullied others just as he had bullied me, and the HR department was planning to take action against him. I was disappointed in myself for having been with someone like him. My ex-husband, who lost his job, seemed to be trying hard to find another one, but it wasn't going well. He should have been in a managerial position by his age, but he didn't have the right experience at his previous job, and he struggled to explain why he left. Barbara was kicked out by Robert and turned to her relatives for help. However, they were afraid she would deplete their savings because she loved to travel. I thought she should find a part-time job since she was still in good health. I moved out of my in-laws' house and now live alone nearby. I still keep in touch with Robert, and sometimes I ask him for advice about work. After being a stay-at-home mom, I started a new life. While job hunting, I was approached by the owner of the inn. He asked, Kiona, would you like to work at my company? He was concerned about what happened to me and wanted to find a position for me. I was so happy to accept. I told him, thank you so much for doing all this for me. He replied, no, we should be grateful to you. We can't thank you enough. I feel like we've already repaid the favor from back then. The company he introduced me to is reputable, with good labor conditions. It was a surprise, because it's in the same industry as the big company my ex-husband used to brag about, but this one is 5 times larger. Everyone there is very nice, and I'm having a more fulfilling and enjoyable life than when I was struggling in my marriage.